Rutendo, your thoughts on the issue of immigration in South Africa as a general?
Okay, that's a good question. For me, the issue of immigration in Africa is where the story starts. A lot of times when the conversation takes place, it's like South Africa is the first place where immigration started taking place. But immigration started taking place the moment Africa started receiving independence. So you've got people like Ezekiel Mpahlele, they left here. You've got the lady that used to be the ex-girlfriend of Nkrumah. He was cheating with her. She was a South African colored lady. And they all left here to go to Ghana because there was no freedom in South Africa. Ezekiel went to be an author and went to really home in his art there. Or Miriam Makeba left, people like Yuma Sekela left. They emigrated into Africa, and then sometimes they would also go to the West. And during the time that we got our independence, we had a lot of South Africans who came into Zimbabwe without papers. And the reason they did it is for the same reason why Miriam Makeba left and got passports in places like Guinea, is that Africa had this OAU that says Africa is for all Africans on a pan-African perspective. So South Africans started coming into Zimbabwe. That's why you had Bob Ladies in Zimande, people like Thabo Mbeki, people like Moleketi Mbeki, people like Geraldine Fraser, Derek Heinekom, even white people came and they were living in Zimbabwe, for instance. Others were in Mozambique, others were in Zambia. People like Joe Mudise were between Zimbabwe and Angola, and sometimes he would also be found in Mozambique because he was coordinating the camps. So we saw South Africans coming into our countries. And contrary to what many people believe, they were not staying in camps. That's why Joe Gabi died in Avondale, a suburb. He was killed there. He was a major member of the ANC and the MK. He was murdered in a suburb because that's where they were living. And because of them coming into our countries without passports, Zimbabwe took a policy to say we will give them passports. And that's why you see that when we had the Wanke campaign with Bokrisane, together with a detachment, their detachment was actually called the Lutuli detachment, that went into Rhodesia then, trying to create a logistics line that will eventually create bases inside South Africa and some in Rhodesia so that they can supply that line to start organizing an armed struggle in South Africa. When they fought this war, they eventually ran out of food because for 3 months they were fighting and running from the Rhodesians and the British South Africa Company. And when they eventually ran out of food, they ran into Botswana. And Masire arrested, Kama arrested them in Botswana for being illegal immigrants and for having unlicensed firearm because he was pressured by the Rhodesians, the South Africans, and the British. And when he did that, the OAU sent 5 members of a task team into Botswana to go and speak with the prisoners. Bokrisane were given 6 years. Some of them were given 9 years for being illegal immigrants. And the OAU said, no. Since when are Africans illegal immigrants in Africa? And he said, hey, I'm under pressure from the British, I'm under pressure from the South Africans, I don't have an army, these guys can invade me. And they said, no, you have to get these people out of prison. So they were arrested in December 1967, and by March 1968, they were released. Now, you need to see the parallel of this is also happening in South Africa today. After South Africans were arrested in Botswana, which was trying to enforce these colonial borders, and the OAU said no. They were then deported back to Zambia. So already we had this immigration. South Africans were immigrating, moving, without passports, without borders, through these countries. And what happened is that because of them staying in our countries, immediately when we got independence, in Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, the apartheid government immediately went to invade and attack those countries for harboring MK and the ANC. And these countries, instead of refusing to say, now that we're getting attacked, we've just started enjoying our independence. We haven't had the time to enjoy our independence that we fought for. These countries said, you know what? We're not going to tolerate what the apartheid government is saying. We're going to fight. Now, before I finish, You have to understand that the apartheid government had given African countries that were getting independence a choice. They said, listen, guys, you guys are getting independence. We're the most powerful superpower in the region, and the Americans had endorsed them being a superpower in the region. Why don't we create something called the Constellation of Southern African States? We'll create DBSA in 1983 so that it can fund you guys to develop these recently independent countries of yours. We will give you food, we will give you trade, we will give you funding, we'll give you finance, we'll even give you military protection. And we'll make this a United States of Africa, so to speak, in Southern Africa. You'll be prosperous. We'll have separate development. You recognize the Bantustans. And don't worry about the black South Africans. Worry about your prosperity. And all African countries said, we are going to create SADC instead. Now you need to understand, SADC was created 18 days before Zimbabwe got its independence. But Mugabe had won elections already in March. And they decided that Zimbabwe was the strongest of these countries, with Angola having financial muscle from the oil. And Zimbabwe was asked, will you join CONSAS? And they said, no, we'll join SADC. And immediately the apartheid government said, very good, we're now going to attack you at war. So this immigration thing, which I refers to a lot, to say, guys, we just got our independence, we haven't enjoyed, we were worse. Before we got independence, we were already at war for accepting immigration from South Africa, from Africans going into Africa. And we decided that we are going to go to war, we're going to forget our economic well-being, and we are going to fight one of the biggest superpowers with nuclear weapons in this region to ensure that South Africa gets independence. And I think for now, I'll end here, because once South Africa got independence, we expected reciprocity. So now Zimbabwe, for instance, is a country that was associated and linked with being instrumental in bringing down the apartheid government together with Angola and their Cubans. They were instrumental in breaking MNR in Mozambique, where the apartheid government was controlling MNR as part of their proxy militaries, where they had their own people there, including their commandos, to try and destabilize Zimbabwe and Mozambique so that they cannot support the liberation struggle of South Africa. And because of the role played by Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe was hated for defeating Abelungu to get independence in 1980. They were hated for fighting apartheid, hence the apartheid government was endorsed by the British and the Americans to destabilize Zimbabwe and to go to war with Zimbabwe in Mozambique and inside Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe then became even more of an enemy when they went to Congo to stop Kagame and Museveni from dividing Congo into 5 separate little states. And because of that, we were targeted by the West, by sanctions. We expected our brethren in South Africa to be supportive, to accept the same refugees to come in so that we can be able to bolster ourselves economically while they're blockading our economy. We expected the liberated South Africa to support Zimbabwe in the same way that the apartheid South Africa supported the Rhodesian government by giving them loans, banking facilities. They were talking about the sanctions that were in Rhodesia. They made sure that loans and export markets were opened in South Africa for the Rhodesian government. They gave it military equipment. Right now, Zimbabwe has got sanctions on it by the West that are illegal. These sanctions are being enforced by South African banks. The decampaigning of Zimbabwe is being done by SABC and the white apartheid media. Yet, SABC used to be used to support the Rhodesians. Where is the camaraderie and the understanding of the sacrifice? And I'll finish by saying, in some cultures, they say that if I save your life, if I sacrifice my life for yours, for the rest of your life, you need to remember that you owe me your life and support when I need support. Thina bantu bemnyama have failed to give each other that support in SADC, to the extent that Zimbabwe has been treated like a leper. It has been treated like like a rotten potato, by neighbors, particularly South Africa, which we treated and gave life and sacrificed our people and took our biggest loan. 60% of the loans that we had in 2000 were taken to fight the apartheid government and to fix the destruction of that government. We're still paying those loans today. They are part and parcel of the loans that we owe the Paris Club. But our brothers would call us illegal immigrants. Our brothers would say that when our people are displaced from economic sanctions into this country, it is not said that they are displaced like you were displaced by apartheid. We are said to be economic migrants. No. Displacement by persecution makes a person a refugee. The fact that they don't know how to apply or they avoid applying for refugee status does not take away their refugee status. It means they must be educated on getting their refugee status. But South Africa should not focus on making them refugees. South Africa must focus on trying to get them legalized according to the Refugee Convention and to fight the sanctions that are displacing them. We should unite like what we did when we fought apartheid.